we can go ahead and get started. My name is Kelsey Erickson Stroyford, if I haven't met you yet. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Emily and Kelsey's Texas Tour, 70 Wins in 70 Days. Many of you know that this has become a new annual tradition for the TRA to really get out and visit our restaurant operators in their communities where they live. That said, we know sometimes it's hard to get out to an in-person event when you are so busy running your restaurant. And so we've added a couple of virtual stops to our Texas tour this year. And this is the last stop of any of them, virtual or in person. And really for us, it's two things. One, we want to report back to restaurant operators and our members all of the great things that we were able to accomplish for the industry in the 88th Texas legislative session, which just wrapped in June of this past year. And then second, we really want to start hearing from you. Even though we just closed the chapter on one regular session, we're already getting ready for the next session. And so we want to make sure that we're already starting to collect sort of the suggestions, the pain points, the ideas from our members, because that truly is where we get our best ideas for advocacy moving forward. So I do have a slide presentation, but before I get to that, I want to turn it over to Emily, who can kind of say some words of wisdom and inspiration and get us kicked off here.
Yeah, I wish I had that. But first, thank you, Casey. Thank you, Kelsey. We've done a lot of these. Amazing. We've been in Houston and Austin this week. And I think the best part about today is we are both at home in our home offices. But I'm just going to say sort of two things. One is it's a lot of information. And I think what we want you to know is to call out of this what matters to you in your business. But also the fact, and what I hope you'll catch at the end, is all that is happening at the federal, state, and local level. We don't want you worrying about on a daily basis. That's really why you have us and the team at the Texas Restaurant Association. So don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you've missed something. But when, simply there's bad things that could happen to you running your business, legislative policy, regulation, we're on it. And then, of course, all the good things that we can do for you, which is really the second half of my comments, which is in the text box below. If there's things that you're dealing with, if there's things in your own restaurant, put it down, because we are already creating that list for the next legislative session, but also the work that we can do for you right now. I'll say I'm doing an important media interview after this to really talk about the fact that many restaurants are struggling, either have continued to struggle for the last 4 years through the really shock and awe of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also then, where are we now, right? Sustained inflation, sustained cost exposure, traffic potentially slowing, that American consumer feeling really kind of like, whoa, holiday season. So we know that's where you might be. And so I just offer you some confidence that, again, we're in another moment of time, but we are going to do everything we can to continue to support and help you thrive. And more than anything, help maybe carry you through this next period of a little bit of unpredictability that we have right now in the market. So Kelsey has done a remarkable job. She hired a remarkable set of lobbyists to support her leadership and her work. And so I'm going to be quiet, let's all hope, and let Kelsey kind of walk you through the wins and, most importantly, the defeats that we were able to achieve on your behalf this year. So with that, I will give it to you, Kels.
Thank you, Em, and pop back in whenever. You're always welcome. So I said in the chat already, but if you have questions, suggestions, please go ahead and share those with us in the chat so that we can make this interactive and really make sure that this benefits y'all. So let me get the screen sharing working here. Hopefully everyone can see that. Erica, maybe come off mute and let me know if that's working all right.
We definitely can see you screen sharing, and it's looking like a preview right now, so it looks good.
Okay, perfect. So first, some quick housekeeping items. This is general education for TRA members. We can't provide legal advice, and this is not meant to be an on-the-record comment to the press. Let me switch this real fast. Does that view better, Erica?
I would kind of go back to
Go back.
the
Okay.
view. Yeah.
Got it. Sorry, y'all. Technology vexes all of us. Anyway, so um, please remember that we cannot provide legal advice, but we do have the TRA Law Center for our members. So if you have a specific situation where you need to get some legal advice, please reach out to that option. And then, as I said, please drop questions in the chat. And for those who are watching this recording, which we are recording it, if you've got questions, just send me a note at my email there. All right, so big picture is what we call 70 wins in 70 days. Really proud of the fact that we worked on a bipartisan, collaborative basis to really deliver to these wins for the entire industry, benefiting our employees, independent restaurants, chain restaurants, franchisees, really the whole economic pipeline of our industry. So let's get into some numbers really fast. The regular session, as I mentioned earlier, only takes place for 140 days every other year. Texas is kind of unique in that way. It actually helps us, I think, deliver more bipartisan policy, more action, more progress compared to, for example, Washington, D.C., which is not known for getting a lot of things done. So over 8,500 bills were filed and only 16% passed. And although the session's 140 total days, when you take out weekends, holidays, that sort of thing, you're really only looking at about 70 working days, which is where we get our 70 wins in 70 days theme. Here's our session by the numbers. As I said, over 70 wins, 25 offensive, 45 defensive. We tracked over 1,100 individual pieces of legislation. I'll just say that's one of the main benefits we're able to provide for our members. You are very busy running a business. You don't have time to read tens of thousands of pages of potential legislation to really analyze it for how it could impact the restaurant industry. But we do that thanks to Erica on my team, who's running tech in the back, and our great lobbyists. We're able to make sure that we're really looking at all of those bills and catching things that might impact the industry. Really proud of the fact that we also had a 100% success rate blocking TRA opposed legislation. In other words, not a single bill that we opposed made it all the way through the legislative process, which is really exciting and something that we're really proud of. So I mentioned earlier, only 16% of the bills that were filed made it all the way through the legislative process. We actually had a 90% success rate getting our priority bills passed. I'll go through each of these in a minute. Hopefully you've seen this graphic before. It's our fun little legislative tracker that we use during session to keep you updated at each step of the way. So let's talk about some of those offensive wins that I mentioned. First is Senate Bill 577. This is really 6 bills in one. So a lot of wins just in this one piece of legislation. First of all, we got rid of some duplicative permit fees that were really impacting both restaurant businesses and restaurant managers. So specifically, the bill says that if a business is being charged a local health or a local restaurant fee, then that same business cannot also be charged a local alcohol fee. We felt like that was really double dipping. There was no reason to have both of those fees be charged. And so we got rid of the alcohol fee in that instance. You'll still have to pay TABC, of course, if you need an alcohol license or permit, but the local government can't add on their own local alcohol fee on top of that. I will say we're seeing a few cities who are pushing back on that. They're getting really creative in their reading of the law. And so if you're encountering this, if you're getting a bill from the city or county that you don't think you should be required to pay, please, please, please send me a note. We're happy to reach out to that local government and try to get the situation resolved. And also, we really need to track those things. I believe we will be back next session to really strengthen this language. And so we need to make sure that we're fully incorporating every type of excuse, rationale, et cetera, to make sure that this intent is very clear in the law. We also said that local governments can't charge a fee for managers who've already completed a state-approved certification like ServSafe. That certification is good throughout the entire state. And so there's no reason a local government should be able to tack on an extra fee for those food managers. Really great because it not only saves businesses money, those two fees together add up to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every year for restaurants and their employees. So really excited about the fact that we were able to stop that and help you save money that goes right back to your bottom line. We also prohibited cities, counties, and the state from restricting packaging, utensils, straws, other to-go items. This impacts both the number of items and the type of items. So in other jurisdictions, we've seen regulations that say you can't give a customer a straw unless they request it first, or you can't use styrofoam, or you can't have more than X number of containers, right? All of those restrictions are no longer allowed in the state of Texas. Want to be clear that we have to be environmentally conscious. It's what the consumers are demanding. It's the right thing to do, but we need to be able to do it sort of in a business savvy way. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all government mandate that's going to get us there. We also stopped local health departments from enforcing local rules that differ from statewide standards until they've been posted on a public website for at least 60 days. Many of you know that your local health departments there's a state standard, and then they're able to add on additional rules on top of that. And that's allowed, but now those have to be public on this website for at least 60 days first. Really helps us with education and compliance and making sure restaurants know what rules are expected of them. Also helps us from an advocacy perspective because we can track what is being imposed in different jurisdictions. And so if there is something that doesn't make sense or could be clearer, we have the ability to see that very quickly and step in on your behalf. And finally, in the 6 bills in one, we clarified that ceilings, bar fronts, wall art, those kinds of surfaces do not have to meet the same cleanable surface standards that apply to your cooking, prep, and eating spaces. Sounds kind of obvious, but believe it or not, we've got a jurisdiction that, excuse me, that doesn't like any exposed wood on the ceiling, for example, or any ceiling treatment that's not flat. And we just think that's silly because no one's obviously eating off of those surfaces, so they shouldn't have to meet the same standards. Sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. Okay, this next one is a big one, regulatory consistency. We worked on this topic for many, many years. Finally, we were able to get it across the finish line. And here in a nutshell is what this bill does. It says that if the state has already regulated a subject in one of these codes, the agriculture code, the business and commerce code, finance code, labor code, etc., then local governments cannot also regulate on that same subject. Sorry, y'all. In other words, on those subjects the state is already regulated on in these areas, we have one set of consistent, predictable rules. You don't have to worry about additional strings from the local governments. There is a pretty small exception if the local government has explicit authority in the law to act on that topic. For example, sexually oriented businesses is an area that the state regulates, but they've also specifically given cities and counties the ability to regulate too. That does not go away because it's very specifically mentioned in our law. How does this help restaurants? Why is it such a big deal? The big thing for us is labor issues, right? Predictive scheduling, what breaks you have to provide your employees and when, what employment benefits you have to provide. All of those topics it's now very clear, can only be regulated at the state and federal level. That's really important because restaurants cross lots of different local government lines. We've got 254 counties in Texas, over 1,200 cities. If they each passed a different ordinance, let's say on predictive scheduling, which goes into paying overtime and when you have to provide your employees their schedules, if they each passed a different version of that bill, you would literally be chasing your tail trying to figure out how to implement those restrictions all across the state. Many restaurants also have multiple locations. Maybe they have employees who work at different locations depending on the day. Employees commute in from different cities to work at restaurants. So it gets really confusing and really complicated to keep up with what law applies in which area if all these local governments have different versions of those rules. So now in Texas, we can rest assured that on issues like labor and employment, we know that state law is the only standard that we have to worry about, in addition to federal rules, of course. There's been a lot of misconceptions about this law, so I just want to kind of clear the record a little bit. Employers are still required to provide rest and water breaks. That's a federal requirement under OSHA. You can certainly get in a lot of trouble if you're not allowing your employees to take rest and water breaks. So don't fall for those sort of misleading headlines in the press. The bill also does not encourage frivolous lawsuits. If a city or county violates the bill's provisions, then a business or a business group could file a lawsuit to stop it. But that person filing a lawsuit can't win any damages, right? There's no money to be made in these lawsuits. And that's because it's not designed for that, right? All it's designed to do is create very clear regulatory lines and enforce those lines. And so if a city or county is doing something they're not supposed to do, the court will tell them to stop, and we'll keep going and keep moving forward. Also important that this bill preserves many instances of local control. In other words, we're not getting rid of city and county's authority to do the things that we need local governments to do, right? Things like zoning, food and sanitation, emergency response, public safety, nuisances. All of these sort of areas of government responsibility have always been taken care of at the local level, and that does not change under this bill. Okay, similarly, we passed a bill that prohibits cities from banning natural gas hookups. Again, something we've seen happen in cities on the East and West Coast. I don't know any restaurant that uses an electric cooktop for their fuel source. And so this is really important just to make sure that we don't have that problem moving forward. Property development. This is one we get a lot of questions about. So already in our law, there were certain deadlines that local governments have to meet when folks submit a property development proposal. Unfortunately, sometimes cities and counties were getting behind. They sometimes miss these deadlines. And so the legislature is trying to create more incentive, more opportunity for these property development reviews to take place on a timely basis. And so what they did with this law is they said if a local regulatory authority misses its deadline by 15 days or more, then the developer may have the work performed by an eligible third party. So you don't just have to wait around forever. It applies to document reviews and inspections. The third party has to be neutral, so can't be, someone on your own team. And then it has to be a licensed engineer or someone who sort of has been employed by regulatory authorities to review this kind of work. Hopefully it will get things moving a little faster. I know we've got lots of restaurants that are trying to open up more locations. And so hopefully this will help in that. Property tax relief. This is an exciting one. The voters in Texas actually just approved this earlier this week. So it's official now. We are going to have $12 billion spent to lower everyone's tax bills and slow the rate of tax growth for everyone. And I keep emphasizing everyone because I mean homeowners and residential property owners, as well as commercial property owners. So restaurants will see the benefit of this. And there's also this 3-year sort of pilot program, meaning a temporary program, that is going to create a 20% cap on the amount of taxable value growth that you can see in a year. The idea being they're trying to provide some controls for really fast growth areas so you don't see your taxable value double, triple in a year. We're going to certainly monitor that and see if that's something that we can extend or tweak to really help restaurant operators moving forward. We also got some franchise tax relief. Lots of our smaller restaurants, and certainly all the medium and large restaurants, pay franchise taxes. This bill is really meant to help the smaller to medium-sized businesses. So they increase the threshold that determines if you have to pay franchise taxes or not, from $1 million in revenue to $2.47 million in revenue. And even more exciting, they index that number for inflation moving forward. So again, trying to capture more of those small to medium businesses so that they don't have to pay franchise taxes at all. And this will be effective for reports filed on or after January 1st, 2024, so very shortly. And also, if you don't owe franchise taxes, you'll no longer have to submit the paperwork establishing that. So saving small businesses some time and money, which is great. Vintage wine. Not a ton of activity in the alcohol space this past session, but this is a good one for us. It allows restaurants to purchase wine directly from a private seller, a private collector, rather than going through the 3-tiered system. There's certain permits you need to get, and then the wine itself, it's a pretty specific type of wine, right? It has to be at least 20 years old. You've got to keep some records. I don't think this is going to be a huge shift in how restaurants sell wine, but it does create a unique and kind of special opportunity for those restaurants that really have a big wine program. It's a new opportunity to provide wine to your guests, which is always great. We also did a lot this session around employee well-being and workforce development, and this is one of those bills that really speaks to that. This bill had a lot of bipartisan support, a lot of work that went into it from a lot of different groups. So excited to see it pass into law. And basically what it does is it creates a new funding model for Texas's community colleges. In the past, community colleges were really funded based on who was attending classes at any point in time, right? Attendance. That's one metric of sort of community colleges' success, but it really doesn't tell much of the story, right? And so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at not only attendance, but also performance metrics. So we're going to reward community colleges that graduate students, and more importantly, that graduate students with meaningful credentials. So we're going to look at the job markets where we need people and make sure that our funding model is encouraging folks to actually pursue those pathways. Also rewards things like transferring to a 4-year college, joining the military, those types of things. So it looks at a lot of different outcomes, but that's the important piece, is we're rewarding outcomes. Great for our industry. We have great community college partners. We were talking last night at an event about just how affordable and the great education that many in our industry can get from a community college. Childcare is another issue within our sort of workforce priority that we've done a lot of work on. So this is one bill that passed this past session to provide some help. And what it does is it lets cities and counties create property tax exemptions for eligible childcare facilities. And the cool thing is it won't reward just any childcare facility. You have to meet certain quality benchmarks, and you have to serve at least 20% subsidized students. Many of these students are going to be kids from families and industries like ours, working parents, and they just need a little extra assistance to afford childcare because it is so expensive in our state right now. Really excited that today, the city of Austin was the first local jurisdiction we're aware of to actually take this step and adopt property tax exemptions. Before that, the voters had to actually approve this statewide, which they did on Tuesday. So we're seeing some of this growing momentum, recognition that childcare is a problem in our state and that it's something that we need to really work together as business leaders, as government leaders, as nonprofit leaders. And we need to all sort of unite to really tackle this problem for families and for our workforce. This is the other good childcare bill that passed this past session. It deals with pre-K programs, and it really tries to help partner school districts, so ISDs, with private childcare providers to create more pre-K classes. That's one of the ways that our school districts can expand pre-K in our communities. It also creates a scholarship program to really help the childcare workforce, which is so deserving of additional assistance. I think the median wage for childcare workers right now is something like $8. It's incredibly low. They do incredibly important work. And so anything we can do to kind of help strengthen that pipeline of early childhood educators is going to be good, not only for our immediate workforce needs, but also as we look forward to sort of the number of workers that we're going to need in Texas moving forward. A lot of data about, if you don't enter kindergarten ready, if you aren't reading at the appropriate level by third grade, it is so much more difficult, so much more expensive to really catch that child up and make sure that they're ready to enter the workforce by the time they're an adult. This is another employee well-being measure that we were really proud to support. Deals with employee benefit resources. So one of the things that we've seen as an association is small businesses in particular, they want to adopt paid leave benefits or insurance benefits or childcare benefits, but they don't know where to turn. They don't know what the best practices are. They don't know what's available to them. We certainly try to fill a lot of that need with our member benefits at the TRA, but we're just one industry, right? There's lots of industries that need this help. And so what this bill does is it just says that the Texas Workforce Commission, who's a great partner of ours, they need to have a page on their website that's got information, resources, model policies, that kind of thing for employers who are seeking to adopt these kinds of policies for their workforce. So there's no new mandates, no requirements, but really just a resource for small businesses all across Texas, not just restaurants. This is another exciting employee well-being initiative, optional family and medical leave. There are some insurance providers who want to sell a group family leave policy in Texas, but before they could do that, they had to create the laws to sort of allow it in Texas. And so that's what this bill does. Will not be required, of course, but it creates another tool, another option for employers or employees that want to buy and purchase this kind of benefit. The new policies can be written on or after January 1st. We've heard that AFLAC is interested in creating these policies in Texas. So we're hopeful that we'll see those enter the market in January. And again, restaurants and other employers will have another option, another way they can really help support their workforce. Food allergens. Want to highlight right off the bat that this bill does not become effective until January 1st, 2024. And I should have said at the outset, if I don't sort of call out a specific effective date, then that means that the bill already went into effect September 1st, 2023, or in the past. So everything that I don't sort of call out especially is already in effect. This one does not go into effect until September 1st, 2024. Deals with a really important issue, a growing challenge, frankly, for restaurants and lots of families across the US, which is food allergens. And so we worked really closely with the mother of a son who unfortunately passed away very tragically after accidentally eating a food product that he was allergic to. She was a great advocate for her community and someone that I think Emily and I both have a lot of respect for. And then we worked with doctors groups who see this as a growing public health challenge. And what we were able to do is really negotiate, I think, a bill that we can all be really proud of. It requires an allergen poster to be placed in an employee area of the restaurant. I know a lot of us are tired of posters. There are tons of poster requirements for restaurants. But this one we're hoping to make impactful. So we're really working with the agency that's going to promulgate this form to make it visual, to make it graphic rather than a lot of words on a page, because we know busy restaurant workers are not going to stop to read a bunch of words. It's going to cover some basic things like the top food allergens, prevention measures, how to respond to someone having an allergic reaction. So really just the basics, and hopefully it serves as a visual reminder for your employees that this is something that they need to take very seriously. The bill also requires all food handlers and all food manager courses to cover this basic information about food allergens. That sounds like a new mandate, but the good news is ServSafe Food Handler and ServSafe Food Manager already cover all of these topics. And we've worked very closely with our colleagues at National who create the ServSafe materials to make sure that we're being responsive to this need in Texas. So you won't have to get any additional training or education. You just got to make sure that your employees are taking a course like ServSafe that covers these really important items. And then importantly, in the bill, we said that local governments cannot create their own food allergen rules. So these are the only set of rules you need to follow. And the bill also doesn't create any sort of private cause of action. So new opportunities for people to sue you. And then, as I mentioned, the requirements don't go into effect until September 1st of 2024. So all in all, we thought this was a really good compromise and a way to address a true public health concern without creating just sort of burdensome mandates that weren't actually going to help address the issue. We also supported a bill to create an Office of Food Security. With Texas growing so quickly, really important that restaurants continue to be part of the conversation about how we feed Texans. So this will allow us to be part of that conversation. Oysters. Our good friend Chairman Todd Hunter is a big champion of oyster mariculture, which is essentially, raising oysters, like farm raising oysters, basically, instead of catching them. So this industry is new in Texas, and as happens with new industries, lots of different governmental actors were involved in the regulations, and things were getting bogged down and not moving very quickly. So what this bill does is creates a new board. 4 of the 7 members will be industry representatives, and so the idea is that we can cut some of this red tape and get this industry growing faster. I'm really excited because not only is it a source of food that many restaurants are excited to sell, but it also, this oyster mariculture has great environmental benefits for the coast. Helps keep our sort of severe weather numbers lower. And so anytime that we can do something good for our economy and the environment, that's a really exciting win. We also supported this ballot initiative, which just passed last Tuesday in our constitutional amendment election. Pretty simple. It just affirms Texans' right to engage in farming, ranching, and similar practices on their own property. Of course, government can still regulate when there's a real need to do it. But again, just sort of affirms that right to farm is important and will be respected in Texas. Then there was also a bill passed on improper service dogs, and increased the criminal penalty for improperly claiming that a dog or some sort of animal is a service animal when they're not. We know that this is unfortunately a real problem, not only in Texas, but across the US. And so we're excited to see this bill pass. We did have a webinar on this topic earlier this year, and so really encourage you to request the recording if you weren't able to watch it live. Our friends at the Texas Humane Legislation Network went through lots of specifics, provided a lot of great real world just explanations to help restaurants deal with not only service dogs, but more importantly, sort of customers who maybe have an issue with, they're trying to bring in a non-service animal, or you're trying to, juggle the needs of customers or employees who some want an animal on the property and some don't. So really encourage you to get the recording of that webinar if you missed it. All right, so that was a lot, but not all of our offensive wins. Now we're going to shift over to some of our defensive wins. So as an example, we were able to work with a bill author who's been a real champion for our industry he was very concerned about the opioid epidemic that is really decimating Texas. And originally, his bill would have required every person who takes alcohol seller server training to also receive opioid overdose training. We heard from our operators that that was a big concern for liability and lots of other reasons. And so we were able to get the bill completely changed and exempt anyone in a restaurant. And we were able to use a restaurant definition we created last session that really is pretty broad to make sure that no restaurant employees are required to take this training. We were also able to protect the tip credit and valid tip pools. This is a fight that we have to be very proactive about time and time again. It's going to keep coming up. There are groups who have successfully lobbied lawmakers to get rid of the tip credit, most recently in Chicago and before that in DC. On the other hand, our industry was able to protect the tip credit against attacks in 2 instances in Maryland lately. And they did it, they were able to get that result because operators joined arm in arm with employees and really made a very clear, compelling case of how this hurts employees in our industry. That's the key. We've got to be really united. We've got to be very clear in our story. And we just have to really illustrate how this impacts employees and how we cannot take away their tips and take away their ability to make such a substantial living like they are right now. We also ensured that restaurants with a full bar permit do not have to deal with people trying to bring in their own wine. That's an economic issue, that's a tip issue, it's a safety issue that we've been very consistent on. We also protected restaurants' right to pass credit card fees on to their consumers as a surcharge. I get a lot of questions about this. I know there's a lot of activity right now from some of the point of sale systems sort of warning you about how you might be doing this. I want to be very clear that restaurants can legally pass on these fees. There are a lot of stipulations. You have to do it correctly. There's notice requirements. There's a cap on what you can pass on. You cannot assess a surcharge for debit cards or gift cards or that sort of thing. It's only credit cards. So there's a lot of sort of restrictions on it, but you do have the right to do it. And we fought very hard at the Capitol to make sure that we protected that right. This was a big one, online privacy laws. You might be thinking, we're restaurants. Why do we care about online privacy? Well, pretty much every restaurant has a website. Many have apps. Many have loyalty programs. You might work with a third-party reservation platform or a delivery platform. That's all consumer data that goes back and forth. And lawmakers are increasingly concerned about consumers being able to control their own data. Believe it or not, a bill went pretty far in the process that would have required every single website in Texas, no matter what it's for, to have an age gate, meaning to get on that website at all, you would have had to prove that you were over 18 with a driver's license or some other form of ID. Really would have been hugely disruptive to business, right? I mean, you think about teenagers ordering pizza all the way up to people who don't have an ID or don't feel comfortable entering that kind of data on a regular, business website. I also worry about, protecting that additional data that's now being collected, right? And what happens when there's a cybersecurity attack. So we were able to get that bill fixed before it became law. And so as a result, we don't have to worry about that for our restaurant websites, loyalty programs, et cetera. I will flag that this is going to be an ongoing fight at the federal and state level. And so it's something that we need to continue to watch very closely. We also ensured restaurants do not have to participate in E-Verify for all new hires. That was a big win. We feel very strongly that that is a government function, sort of border security, immigration, and we shouldn't be requiring private businesses to do the government's job. We also stopped a bill that would have allowed local governments to require people to purchase, install, and maintain an automated external defibrillator. Many restaurants have these. They can be life-saving, but we generally don't support, requiring business to do things that they're not being paid to do. Creates an unfunded mandate. Two other bills I want to just flag for you. Hair discrimination. This is a topic that has been talked about for a long time, and legislators were able to pass in Texas this time. All it does is it adds hairstyles commonly or historically associated with race to existing discrimination rules. Protected hairstyles includes braids, locks, twists, that sort of thing. The key for us, and the real sort of win for us in this, is that there weren't any new enforcement provisions or penalties or anything like that. It fits right within what we already do, what we already understand in terms of employment discrimination rules. So just as you can't refuse to hire someone because of their race, you can't refuse to hire someone because of their protected hairstyle. I have gotten a few questions about how does this sort of work in tandem with our health code restrictions on hair length, for example. My best advice on that is to just make sure that you're applying very objective, consistent rules. So for example, you might say everyone with hair, that comes lower than their shoulders has to put it up if they're doing certain job tasks, right? So then you're not discriminating against anyone because of the type of hairstyle they have. You're applying a very objective rule to everyone regardless of their hairstyle. If you have any questions about that, send me a note and we can talk, but that's my best general advice on that one. Second, there is a new poster requirement. And again, I know people are tired of posters, but the good news on this one is there's no enforcement or penalties. So it's not a gotcha. It's truly something that's meant to just educate people. There's going to be a poster that the Texas Workforce Commission creates. We expect to get it in March, so you don't have to worry about anything until then. And all it does is tell employees about a hotline that they can use to anonymously report violent or suspicious activity. It's the classic, if you see something, say something. Again, came about as a result of a really tragic set of circumstances where someone was acting very suspiciously, but no one came forward until it was too late. And so, again, this is something you'll need to take note of in March, but nothing to do quite yet. And then also just flagging, there are some new requirements for plant-based and cell-cultured food, not something restaurants directly need to worry about, but you will maybe see it on some of the products that you purchase. It's a very simple requirement, and the folks that are producing these types of food are usually very clear that they are not meat, right? That's their whole marketing ploy. And so I don't think we'll see a ton of changes there. So that was a very quick summary of the mini bills that we got passed this past session. Why don't I pause there for a second and just see if we have any questions or comments? Doesn't look like it. All right, then I will keep going. But if anyone has any questions or comments, don't hesitate to tell us. Okay. So our ongoing work, going to cover some of this really fast. Local. Hopefully y'all know by now that as a TRA member, you are protected very proactively at the local, state, and federal level. Our executive directors in each of our 4 metros really head up that work, working with me and Erica. We've got some examples of some recent wins here. I would say some of our ongoing priorities around permits and fees and taxes, of course. Noise ordinances are a continuing concern. And then also this new opportunity to create property tax exemptions at the local level for our childcare providers. Really proud that Austin just passed an ordinance like that today. At the state level, I still get a lot of questions about the Texas Travel Industry Recovery Grant. I do not believe that at this point the state has even started processing the most recent round of applications. So if you applied and your status says processing, that means that you're still in line. Please, 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 if that is your situation, if you're currently in line, just make sure that you are checking the email associated with that account regularly, because if they have any questions or issues, they will reach out to you through that email. And if you don't respond within a certain time period, they will close out your application and there will not be another opportunity to file it. So just please keep an eye on that. Also, if you have live music at your restaurant, you might qualify for this new tax rebate program. And so reach out to me and I can help you with that. We're also very excited to be launching what we're calling the Employers for Childcare Task Force, or E4C. I mentioned before that childcare is a big priority for the TRA, and we are committed to making it an even bigger priority in the future. So we have joined forces with several other business groups. We're actively recruiting members right now, and we will be launching really at the end of this year with a whole agenda and program for next year so that we can develop some really common sense pro-business policy proposals to take to the legislature next session to strengthen our childcare network in Texas. And if you're wondering why all the emphasis on childcare, it's really very simple. Worker shortages are our industry's #1 challenge. That was the case before the pandemic. It's the case again now. And childcare is incredibly difficult to find in Texas. And when you find it, it's usually incredibly expensive. And so for all the families out there who have working parents, if it costs that family more to put a child in childcare than they can earn in a restaurant, then that is an employee that we are losing. And often it's some of the best employees that we're losing. So it's an issue that we really need to address as a state so that we can build up our workforce, make our workforce more resilient. And also it's the right thing to do by our employees. We have some of the hardest working employees who are juggling family life, work life, with everything else that it takes to be a citizen in today's day and age. And so if we can help them with this, it will really benefit everyone. We also continue to monitor the special legislative sessions that Governor Abbott has called. We just ended the 3rd special session and started the 4th special session. And the only thing to really note from the special sessions so far is that SB 7 from the last special session prohibits all employers from requiring, COVID-19 vaccines from their employees, job applicants, or contractors. I'm not aware of any restaurants that have been doing that, but I just want to flag it in case there is an exception out there. That is about to become illegal in Texas, and you can face significant fines. So just good to get that word out. There's also lots of rulemaking happening right now. So all of these laws that got passed, the agencies that are tasked with enforcing them are creating those rules right now, and we monitor that very closely. And then, as I said at the beginning, we're already getting ready for next session. We are very actively fundraising. All of this work is incredibly expensive in a state as big as Texas. And so we've got our TRA PAC and our Traction Fund, both directly support our advocacy mission on behalf of all Texans. And then we're also preparing for next session, which is why we need y'all's ideas, feedback, and suggestions. Also, we are very busy at the federal level. There aren't a lot of state restaurant associations that get as sort of engaged in federal issues as we do. We're a very big state. We have a lot of legislators in Congress. And so when we can, we get involved and try to really help our colleagues at National, who are great partners. Here are just a few of the issues that are happening in the executive branch right now. One of the things we're seeing in DC is that Congress is increasingly gridlocked, right? They can't agree on policy. And so the agencies are stepping in and being more and more engaged in policy making. The new overtime proposal is an example that would significantly increase the threshold that determines if you have to pay someone time and a half overtime or if they can be a salaried employee. There's also changes to the joint employer rule that just came out, and a rule on the independent contractor definition. Those are all things that we are working on very closely. Emily, can I have you jump in for 1 second so I can grab a tissue? Allergies are getting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So as Kelsey mentioned, we also do a lot of work at the federal level due to the size of the delegation, but also because we work so well with our National Restaurant Association counterparts. And really, it's that partnership that protects you at that local, state, and federal level. And so on the federal side, on the legislative, there is the Credit Card Competition Act. We have been told that there will be a vote on this piece of legislation that essentially would insert competition into the credit card space. We've been promised a vote. Whether we get the vote, I always tell you the truth. So does Kelsey. I'm not so sure. At the same time, they've just come out to essentially suggest or indicate that they may lower the cap on the debit card space. Just from my own opinion, this is Emily's personal opinion, maybe, I don't know why it would be okay to lower it or insert competition or lower that fee on the debit card and then say it's not okay on the credit card. So we realize this is typically the third largest line item on many P&Ls. If you actually take a step back and look at your P&L, you'll see just the exorbitant increase in fees. And we've been told there's going to be 2 more increases again in the next year. On these credit card fees, you have limited to no negotiating power. So this is one that we are going to stay very involved in and continue to fight. And Representative Gooden, who's right out of the North Texas area, is on this bill as well. Immigration and visas. I think Kelsey and I, we get so many calls about, can we fix, how can we get people working in our industry? Can we get a process? Can we overhaul and find some comprehensive immigration reform? Yes, yes, yes. It's one of our #1 public policies. Do we think it's going to happen in the near term? We don't. And that's really because of what is going on in Washington. Frankly, what's going on around the rest of the world. And even just today, you watch some of the chaotic behavior coming out of DC. And so the lack of ability to get anything done, let alone something passed, is a challenge. However, that doesn't mean that we're not working on this on a really almost a daily or weekly basis, and have groups like forward.us as our partner to help make sure that we get traction. The National Restaurant Association has actually formally kind of, I guess, suggested that there may be a way to do this through a non-path to citizenship worker program for our specific industry. So we're putting a lot of ideas on the table, but I just want everyone to always remember immigration is a super complicated issue on both sides of the aisle. And then, of course, the tip credit, I'm not going to get into that again because Kelsey reviewed it very well, but we do see that elimination in many parts of the US. It seems to be growing, and we want to make sure we do our part in Texas here to make sure that we maintain that for our employees and our restaurant owners. We have a current ongoing lawsuit on the judicial side. We tend to partner with the Restaurant Law Center, uses us quite a bit. They are an incredible group that helps us when we see something that we think is a law that's been passed that is not good for us, but also we feel like maybe the merits of that law can be challenged. And so we are part of a lawsuit on 80/20/30. As of today, I believe it is now public. Kelsey, yes, give me the nod. Many of you, anyone in the franchise system, or frankly, any restaurant operator, should be aware of the decision on joint employer. It is incredibly negative impact. We don't agree with that decision, and we have joined and really are leading the way on a lawsuit to challenge this, and that was actually filed today. And then last is the U.S. Fifth Circuit ruling on the ultimate employment decisions. And I think, Kelsey, that's there now, which is, we haven't heard anything yet out of the Fifth Circuit, correct?
We have the Fifth Circuit ruling. What we're waiting for, there's a circuit split. And so this is something we're watching very closely in terms of discrimination complaints, sort of what can trigger that type of complaint. And so it was a surprising ruling from the Fifth Circuit. And so we'll need to see if it sticks, so to speak, but definitely something we're watching closely with our legal partners.
Excellent. All right, next slide.
Thank you, Emily.
You good?
Yes. Those allergies in Austin, they are the real
No,
deal.
Elizabeth, one of my twins, what do you call it this time of year? There's mountain cedar.
Ah, yes.
That's it. Mountain cedar.
Thanks for the patience, everyone. Takes a
Yeah.
village. Last in our presentation, which is perfect for Emily to be here for, is please stay engaged. Here are some key action items for you. I know we presented on a lot of different bills, but these are really the ones that you need to sort of take action on now, right? So as I said, if you applied for the Texas travel grant, please make sure you're checking your email. If you run into issues or questions there, send me a note. And then in terms of the laws that passed, make sure you're no longer paying those local alcohol fees. I had a board member at an event last night tell me I just paid $1,400 for a local alcohol fee. I guess I shouldn't have paid that. And I said, no, we've been telling you for months that you shouldn't pay that. And this person's a board member, so I don't mind putting them subtly on blast. And then same with local food manager fees. And in all seriousness, if you get pushback from your local health department on either of these, please send me a note. Let me see if we can help. And then also make sure your team, especially your HR, your hiring managers, are aware of the new protection for hairstyles commonly or historically associated with race. Certainly want to make sure you're respecting that law. And then once the Texas Workforce Commission develops the new workplace violence poster that we talked about, we will make sure to share that with you so that you can post it as you're required to do. And then lastly, as I mentioned, I don't know any restaurants that are doing this, but just to double check, make sure you are not requiring your employees, contractors, or job applicants to get a COVID-19 vaccine. So in all that big presentation with all those different laws, these are really the key sort of takeaways that you need to take note of today. And then lastly is really our ask of you, and that's please be a part of this great work that we're doing. Our voices are stronger together. We have such a more, I was going to say impactful impact. You can tell it's been a long week. We have such a bigger impact when we have more restaurants working together with us. And really the way you do that is pretty simple. Please continue to be a TRA member. If you're not sure if you're a TRA member, if you're not sure if you've, paid your dues recently, please just ask. We're happy to look that up for you. And please be our ambassadors out there. If you can take one or two little tidbits from this presentation, I guarantee you, if you talk to your colleagues in the industry who aren't as connected with the TRA, they would be shocked and really excited to know about these things, right? So tell them and say, this is the work the TRA is doing. We'd love to have you be a part of this effort. And then second, I mentioned before, it's incredibly expensive to do this work in Texas. Please invest in our efforts in whatever way you're able. The QR code on the screen there takes you directly to our online contribution page. You can give with personal or corporate funds. You can set up a monthly contribution. $5 a month will go a long way to really helping us build out our advocacy efforts. And then also, please make sure you're keeping an eye on our newsletter. It is chock full of updates, of member benefits, of educational resources like this webinar. We just did a great webinar last week on alcohol to go regulations. That one was, again, just full of really useful tips. So that newsletter is really where you're going to have access to all of those benefits and also all of the updates and the things that you need to know. And then my email is up there. The whole TRA team really is at your disposal. We're here to help you. We're very accessible. We don't bite, I promise. So please reach out anytime you have a question, anytime there's an issue. No question is too small. So please reach out. Anything to add on that, Emily?
No, I would just say keep up the good fight. We're entering the winter months. We're going to help launch a campaign to remind consumers to include restaurants in their giving. And then as we get into the new year, that January, early February period can be a little challenging. So I just, I feel like sometimes when it's not as predictable and there's some concern and a little bit of uneasiness in the air, it's really important for us to remind you that you're operating in a great state. You have a team that cares deeply about your success. And it doesn't matter what the issue is impacting your restaurant. If you are stuck, please reach out. Yesterday I had someone call me that was thinking about renewing a lease in a particular area of the state. Wasn't sure, huge impact either way it went, and was able to put him in touch immediately within hours of a couple operators within the same block. And they had the best conversation, and he's has more clarity now on what he wants to do. So that's also our opportunity, is to connect you to others that may be able to help. So don't ever think you're in this alone.
Well said. We're here for you. We're passionate about this work. The work continues. We have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot we're doing now, and we already have identified a lot of great projects for next year. So it continues with your support. And thank you for joining us today. We did record the presentation. We'll make the recording available. And as always, just reach out if we can help you in any way. So with that, I think we can wrap it up and say thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you, Lewis.